So today I am painting a D&D Ogre. He is from the I think he's technically a Pathfinder mini from the Deep Cuts range right here. But D&D is just the role-playing game I am the most aware of, so I will probably continue to call him a D&D Ogre. I apologize, Pathfinder, that's my bad. So I've just Zenithal primed him. I went pretty heavy on the white from above this time. There's just a couple hints of the black in a couple places. We're going to use mostly contrast on this guy because it'll be quick. So I'm going to start with Fireslayer Flesh. It's like a medium brown, slightly reddish tint to it. And I'm going to use this on the skin. Hopefully we will not have any of the same paint application problems that we did last week. I think that was last week. I think I got those cleared up with a change of primer. And, yep, this paint is applying much better on this primer. So I'm just going to get all the skin covered in this color. This is actually a much darker skin tone than I thought it was. Which is fine. I mean, I feel like ogres can probably be any color. But I just didn't realize it was that dark. I haven't usually used this color as a skin tone. I've used it on bases and stuff, but that's okay. We will continue on. It just means we'll have to adjust the other parts of the paint scheme. I was going to give him quite a dark brown apron, or tunic, or whatever you want to call it, but we'll just have to switch it around and use a different color. It's one of the, even if you're just painting just to have fun with your friends playing some D&D, it's always a good idea to not have your miniatures be monochromatic. Get some contrast in there. And if you think about a miniature, and you can even do this, if you take a picture of your miniature and then set it to grayscale, some phones have that capability. Other things you might have to put it into a program like Photoshop or something and change it to grayscale. Regardless of how you do it, if you do that, you'll immediately be able to tell if your model is too monotone or not. You should be able to see, basically you should be able to tell what everything is without color on it. So cloth should still read as cloth, and it should read as different from flesh, and so on and so forth. If you can't do that, then you need to adjust your miniature. Fireslayer Flesh, I like that contrast paint for dirt. Yeah, I usually use it as a dirt color, but I figured since it is called flesh, I'd try it on the skin tone. And I actually kind of like it. It's darker than I expected it to be. I guess maybe on dirt I'm not really paying attention to how dark it is, but I quite like it. So it's going to have to use it on more flesh going forward. And this guy also has very well-defined muscles. And looking at him, he actually may have too many muscles. I'm not sure if all these muscles are actually there. Of course, he is an ogre, not a human, so who am I to say what ogre muscle structure is? Also, I'm not exactly in peak bodybuilder shape, so I'm not sure my advice on human muscles should necessarily be followed. But regardless of how anatomically correct his muscle groups are, they will allow for some nice paint to be applied to them and look good. That's all I really care about in this instance. Very mountain-esque looking ogre flesh. I like the brown. Yeah, it's It's a nice color. It's always funny how, you think you know what a color looks like, even if you've used it a bunch, and then you use it on something that you haven't used it on before, and you just get a whole, brand new outlook on this color. It's happened to me on several occasions. I don't know if I'll have a chance. Actually, I am. I'll use it on the rock later on this. This color right here, Warp Fiend Gray. I always didn't really do anything with this color. It's like a grayish, purplish color, whatever. And then I used it on to dry brush some stone a couple weeks ago, and now I've used it on almost every miniature I've painted since then. Even though it's been around for years and years and years. It just takes one use of the paint that really grabs you to change it from just one of the paints in the group to one of the favorites. Alright, I think this is his foot back here. I think the wrapping ends. I could be mistaken, though. But that's okay. We'll leave it. Not a big deal. Hopefully no one's looking at the feet of our ogre anyway. They'll be looking at the actual body of the ogre, and the head, and the giant rock he's going to fling at them, so. Alright. I think that's all the skin on him. Oh, his fingers. Oh, and I missed a spot up here. And that is probably skin also, actually. Just get it in. Actually, I'm going to paint these skulls with layer paint, so I don't have to be as careful as I was being. There we go. That looks like all of it. Maybe just a little bit up there. Get right up to the hairline. Oh, and the fingers. That's right. The fingers. So these fingers are going to be... trying to think through what color. Yeah, I'm going to paint the rock with layer paint. So I'm not going to be super careful about this. I'm just going to make sure the skin is covered and go on from there. And these hand wrappings are going to be a darker color. Or at least enough of a dark color that this, if I get a little bit on there, it won't matter. Hey camera, stay in focus please. Thanks. So there are some slight problems with streaming on Facebook Live as opposed to another platform, but I think Facebook Live gives everyone the most accessible way to watch it. They don't have to go to an external website or anything, which I'm sure would be absolutely and is no problem for a lot of people. But just as this, all you gotta do is be on Facebook that you're probably already on and click the play button. So all right, so then I'm going to do the wrapping I was talking about there, and I'm going to use one of my favorite contrast colors, which is Snakebite Leather. I'm going to use this on the hand wrappings, the wrist wrappings, and the ankle wrappings. I'm going to put this on pretty heavy. That is the thing with contrast paint. You can significantly alter the color based on how heavily you put it on. So I'm going to put this on pretty heavy. I suppose to a greater or lesser extent, you can do that with layer paint. Like you can always glaze paint on and thin paint down. But you have to go to the extreme. Like you really have to move a paint to a glaze to really change the color that it comes out as. Generally, thinning a layer paint or just applying a layer paint straight out of the pot will not give you a significant color change. In the sense that, like, if the contrast paint was layer paint, putting it on thick versus thin, the thin color could be a highlight color. If you just thin down layer paint, you aren't going to be able to highlight the same color layer paint with that. So it will obviously change it a little bit. It just won't change it in any significant way. Don't know if that made sense. I used to say the word paint a lot. Hopefully it made sense. So I'm just making sure that there's a lot of paint on my brush when I apply it to the model, just so we have a nice, even distribution of this color. Down layer. Oh, and I missed up layer. Alright, then I'm going to do the same thing on the wrist wrappings up here. There we go. I did say in the post saying that this was happening today, I mentioned how I was going to talk about the difference between painting large-scale miniatures and smaller-scale miniatures, which doesn't necessarily apply to this particular model because he is in scale. He's just bigger. But imagine if he was... Well, no, we'll stick with how he is. So he's a bigger thing in a world where humans are much smaller than him, typically. So, like... You know, this guy and this guy exist in the same world. Exactly the size that they are. And so that changes some things, and should change some things about how you paint them. Bigger things will always cast darker shadows, just by their nature. If you think about it as... If you think about your... light being let's see, how can I explain this? I'll just show it to you in a second as soon as I finish this color. Alright, so say that this guy's arm is going to cast a shadow on his head. Alright, so say our light source is coming from right here, and this arm is going to cast a shadow on his head. So on a small thing, say, let's see here. We need a paint. Here we go. So on a small thing, we have... Where can you see this? There we go. So we have... There's the arm right there. Right in here is the arm. So the sun, or the light source, is here and here. And so there's more light pollution that gets in past the obscuring object, in this case his arm. But when his arm is bigger, say his arm sticks all the way out to here, the light source is unchanged. The sun is still here and here. So the light pollution goes the same distance, maybe only to here and to here this time. So now in here is further from the light pollution, and so is darker. So larger things will always cast darker shadows. So this is sometimes a way that painters can get in trouble, is they paint things that are supposed to be large the same way as something that is supposed to be human size, and it doesn't look right. So like, say you were painting a transformer, for instance. Well, transformers are like the size of buildings. If you highlight and paint it the same way that you paint a knight fighting a dragon, it won't look right. It'll just look like a small robot. But you want it to look like a building-sized transformer. So you need to take your contrast much more to the extreme and make your shadows ultra deep and your Your highlights need to remain basically the same. That doesn't matter. The same sun is shining on them. But your shadows need to be much, 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 much deeper. And so for this guy, how we're going to do that is after I paint him, I'm just going to go back in with some darker ink and put it in some places, because this guy is just, he's not very big in comparison to the sun or our light source here. But in reality, if an ogre walked by you, he would cast a much deeper shadow. So we're going to have to go back and deepen that after we paint him. But we'll do that later, not for right now. So now I need to find a color for his clothes or his tunic or whatever this is here. I was going to do it in a dark brown, but the skin color sort of made me change my mind on that. So instead, I'm thinking about what? Just taking a look at my paints here. I think I might do it in... Does that make sense? Maybe not. I was going to do it in a very... Actually, I think I'll do it in this. I haven't used this color on stream, I don't think. So we're going to use Griff Charger Gray. Sort of a grayish, bluish sort of thing. Doesn't apply very strongly at all. So we might have to apply a couple layers. That's okay. So let's just see what this gets us. Can always paint over it later if it's terrible. So I'm just going to apply this to the whole tunic here. And I can go over all this other stuff because I'm going to come back and paint that with layer paint. So it's not a problem. I'm going to avoid painting it if I can, just because it wastes paint. If you're just going to paint over something, there's no sense in painting it. But I don't have to be careful for any aesthetic reason. Oh, and so earlier when I was talking about the zenithal that I went crazy on the white, that was basically so that our zenithal didn't do too much of the work for us, because I wanted to show going back in and painting in the deeper shadows that you need to do on a darker miniature. You can just do it. You can achieve a lot of it with the primer, but I just wanted to show how the technique will work if you, for some reason, don't want to or can't do it with your primer. I think I missed a little bit of skin in there. That's okay. We'll fix that in a bit. I'm going to leave the straps not this blue color and make it a different color. All right. So there's that done. Just make sure the contrast paint isn't pooling too much anywhere. And make sure it's got good coverage. Alright. So there's that color. Then I'm going to go in and do the straps. And I'm going to do the straps in the original dark brown that I was going to do the tunic, whatever it is, in, which is Cygor Brown. Nope, I picked up Wildwood first. We'll use Wildwood. They're pretty similar. Cygor is slightly chestnutty and a little bit richer. Wildwood is more of a flat or wooden color. They're both very dark though, so that's what we'll do. Just want to be careful that this brown doesn't run down onto our blue. Also want to make sure that the whole stream isn't just my hand. And you can actually see the model. That would be ideal. What do we have up here? Oh, skulls. That's what that is. All right. I think this is going to be... I think we only have a couple more contrast colors after this. And then we will get into the layer paint. There's not going to be a ton of layer paint on this guy, but some things it's just better to use a layer paint than a contrast. Alright, so there's the straps all painted up. Make sure I got the sides there, and I did. Oh, just a little bit up by his ear here. There we go. Alright, so now I'm just gonna, our blues had a little bit of time to dry. I'm just gonna grab my dry paintbrush and grab some of the blue out where it's pooling a little bit too much. This will help it dry faster and it'll look better. Don't need to pull it all out, but some places it's just too much. So it is worth pulling back out. Alright. So I'm going to let that blue dry because the next thing I want to do is work on the bones, but I need to let the blue dry first. So I think I'll just paint in the rock here that he has in his hand. I'm going to use a layer paint for that. I'm going to use Mechanicus Standard Gray. It's just, as the name says, your standard gray. Sort of a medium to dark gray. Uniform gray, you might say. In other brands, this would probably be uniform gray. Making sure to get all the little bits of rock in between his fingers here. Alright. So there's the rock covered. Our blue is getting towards dry. So I think we can safely go in and start layering them. So to start off on those bones, I'm going to use Rakarth Flesh. Sort of a brownish, off-whitish, tannish kind of color. A lot of ishes in that, I know, but I don't know how to describe it. It's Rakarth Flesh. That's what it is. So just going to go in and paint all the bones. And I'll paint in... Will I? No, I was going to say I think I'll paint in all the straps that are holding the bones on in this same color. But I changed my mind. I think I won't do that. I'm going to come back in and do them in another color. Okay, got some more skulls over here. A couple skulls on the back. A little bit of this color on his skin. Oops. I'd go back and fix that, but I don't think it's worth fixing on stream just because you guys, you know how to fix a mistake if you make it. Go back, repaint it. Not a big deal. So I won't bother fixing it right this second, but I did make a couple mistakes with that color. Just going to grab out some of this blue again that is pulled up in here. There we go. All right. So while that dries, I think I will... No, I can go ahead and do the... I'm going to do all the bits that are holding the bones on and stuff like that. I'm going to do that in Steel Legion Drab. So this is basically going to be everything else that's on the model except his hair. Just gotta see where these straps and stuff are coming in on these things. Doesn't have to be super precise, because this guy is just sort of a jumble of all sorts of stuff here in the middle. So I'm not super concerned with it. And paint these buttons the same color also, why not? Can't hurt. Alright. And some buttons here. And then the stitching on this guy. Alright. So I'm going to let that dry. And I'm going to do his hair. So I'm going to do his hair in... what color? He's got a darker skin tone, so I'm going to do a darker hair color. Those typically correlate, at least I think. In my mind, they do. I could be wrong, though. I just have to find... Nope. Nope. Somewhere on this paint shelf is the color I'm looking for. Of that, I am certain. I'm actually... No, here it is. Okay. Found it. I was going to pretend like actually I had a different decision, but no, really, I just couldn't find my paint, but then I found it, so we're good. So I'm going to use Black Templar. I'm just going to do his hair real quick. This is a dark color, but it's also contrast paint, so it will still maintain some of the brightness of the primer, rather. So that should be good. Because nothing, especially hair, is not going to be true black. Be a very, very dark brown. But this should work pretty well. Alright, there's his hair. I'll just make sure to get his hairline fully painted here. And I'll put his eyebrows in while we're here. There we go. Oh, a little more up here. There we go. Eyebrows. Check. So then, let's see, what is... Yeah, we're still waiting on this stuff to dry. I'm just going to roll with it. It'll be okay. Technically, I should let this dry a little bit more, but I'm a little impatient. So I'm going to use... Get out of the way. I'm going to use Agros Dunes, and I'm just going to put it all over the tunic. All over the bones, all over the straps, all over the blue, all over everything. I think it's going to look good. You know, if it doesn't, well... I messed it up then. But if it does, like I think it's going to, then awesome. And this isn't going to be the last step also. There'll be more steps after this. I'm just going to do this. This Agros Dunes is slightly yellow. So combined with the blue, it should give it a slightly green tint almost. Which I think will look okay. And then once we dry brush it, which we are about to do as soon as this dries, then we'll be all set. And while this dries, before we do the dry brush, we'll finally get to the point about bigger things casting deeper shadows. And we will add some of those deeper shadows to this model. Just cover up any little mistakes we made in there with this color. Never hurts. And little bits of the hair in here weren't black, so we'll just cover them up also. Oh, and then right here. Alright, there we go. So now our tunic has a sort of greenish tint to it, like I said. And like I said, also we're going to come back and we're going to dry brush these bones and all that, so that'll brighten them right up and won't be a problem. But now we're going to talk about the bigger things casting bigger shadows. So I'm going to pull out 2 colors here. Pull out my Black Templar and my Basilicanum Gray, if I can find it. It's like I should have these things prepared before the stream, but you know. So, Black Templar, Basilicanum Gray. Just going to give them both a shake, and I'm going to open both of them here. And I'm just going to have them both in front of me, so I can dip into whichever one I happen to need at the time. I'll just show you what they look like here real quick. So that's the Black Templar, quite dark. This is the Basilicanum Gray, as you can see, just not quite as saturated as the Black Templar. So we're going to use both of these in combination to really attempt, anyway, to sell our really dark shadows. So we're just going to say that our light source is coming from up above him, so that we can get this nice rock with a drop of paint on it. There we go. This nice rock to give us some good shadows, and his arms and stuff like that. So I'm going to start with Basilicanum Gray. And I'm just going to hold the miniature so I can see where the profile of the light would be coming from. And then I'm just going to paint this on it, sort of below that. Paint it on. And then wipe most of my paint off the brush and just feather it up the arm, just to blend it in. We're going to do the same thing on this arm. Paint it in. This is Basilicanum Gray I'm using here, not the Black Templar quite yet. And then same thing, just feather it up the arm. Maybe even get a little water on the brush and just feather it. So you get a nice transition between the shadow and the skin. So there you go. Now you can see the under the arms is quite a bit darker. So now we're going to go brush into the Black Templar and then brush into the Basilicanum Gray. So now on our brush we have about a 50-50 mix, give or take. And we're just going to paint the undersides of his arms here. And do the same thing again. Maybe a little more Basilicanum Gray. Just get this heavy shadowed in there. And then rinse the brush off, and we're just going to feather this shadow down the skin. And then look at it from the front. Pull that shadow down. So this is just basically deepening the shadows that would exist in real life, but that the miniature scale is not allowing us to see, really. Alright, so there's that. So now when we look at it, you can see that the light we have coming from above is being accentuated by the darker tones that we put in there, so that it really looks like he's big and heavy and holding up this big thing that's blocking out the sun, which is exactly what we want. So then the next thing to do would be to do the same thing, about a 50-50 mix of the Black Templar and the Basilicanum Gray, and just do the insides of his legs under here. And then we'd do the same thing on the base if we were doing the base. I'm not going to do the base right now. Well, actually, I'll check my time and then see if we're going to do the base right now. But that's basically the core of what you want to do, is just look at where shadows already exist and accentuate them, so that even in miniature scale, the shadows still look like they are deep and rich shadows. Just going to pull this back up here a little bit. There we go. Alright. So then I'll go ahead and I'm going to use the hairdryer on him just for a second because he's still a little bit wet, and then we're going to dry brush the bones. All right. That looks to be about good enough. Dry enough to dry brush anyway. So I'm just going to take some pallid witch flesh, which is a pretty bright white color. And I'm going to get some on one of my dry brushes here. Get most of it wiped off. And then just come in and very gently go over these bones. Too much paint still on my brush, so I'll keep wiping some off. There we go. Try again. That's better. So I'm just going over the bones here, bringing out the edges. Get some more paint here. Okay. Just picking the skulls and stuff out a little bit. There we go. And then I'm going to pick out just some other areas of the guy's tunic. Just the areas that would be more brightly lit up. So the very tops of this here. His fingers. Again, keeping the idea of the sun in our head from the same angle. So we'd have bright lights coming down like that. I'm going to do some on this rock. The top of the rock would be quite bright and vibrant. The bottom of the rock would be in shadow. I'm going to do some on the muscles here, just a little bit. And the top of the apron here. All right. Looking pretty good there. I'm just going to take some pallid witch flesh, which is what we were just dry brushing with my layer brush, and just stipple in a little bit on these bones, just to give them a little more life. There we go. Just to make them pop a little bit more there. And then I think we'll be just about done here with that ogre. So yeah, just remember, if you're painting a bigger model like this, so normal human scale, be about this big, he's obviously much bigger, that if you want him to look in scale, you need to go in and darken the shadows. The natural shadows will not be good enough typically, just from your light source above. You should go in and physically paint in some of the shadow, which will then be accentuated by the real shadow. But if you can notice, like, if we take a look at this guy, so look at the darkness of underneath the rock versus the darkness of, like, under his sleeve here. You can still see the brown and the blue under his sleeve. Under that rock is almost completely black. So that's the kind of thing you're looking for, is that guy's shadows should be much deeper than this guy. This guy's a funky miniature because he's got this giant brimmed hat here. So those shadows are going to be incredibly deep anyway. But let's see if I can find another example here. Oh yeah, we'll just use this other blue wizard. So looking at the difference between the shadow under the rock and the shadow under the hat of this guy. Under the rock, you can't really see details. It's blacker than black. It's quite black. But under his hat, you can still see his skin tone. You can see his hair, that kind of thing. That's what you want to achieve. You want to achieve very dark, dark shadows on things that are going to be bigger. So hopefully that helped. Hopefully you learned something. If you didn't learn something and you're like, I can do this way better, Greg, why did I even bother? Then at least you learned how to not do something. And that's still learning, so it's still good. I'll be back on the Warhammer group doing something Warhammer related on Friday, and then I'll be back here next Wednesday doing something beginner or D&D or board game related, possibly painting a dragon, who knows. But thank you everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.